What's good, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Goats of Growth. Please subscribe, rate, and review if you haven't already. And like always, the J. David Group, which is my company, is sponsoring this episode. We help recruit today's go-to-market teams that will lead the next generation of unicorns. Email me, web, at thejdavidgroup.com to learn more about how we can help. And don't forget, I'm also working on a book with the same title of this podcast, The Goats of Growth, which is the untold stories of the greatest revenue leaders of all time, due out by the end of 2023. So follow me on LinkedIn to learn more about that. Now, my guest today is Casey Jacox, who is a sales and leadership coach who helps companies realize the power and impact that humility, which I just posted about not so long ago, vulnerability, and curiosity, and how they have an internal and external. Shoot, I screwed that up. I'm going to start over. Jaron, starting over. Back up. Sorry, I shouldn't have ad-libbed.
It's all right.
Should know better. Okay, here we go. What's good, everybody? Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Goats of Growth. Please subscribe, rate, and review if you haven't already. And like always, the J. David Group, which is my company, is sponsoring this episode. We help recruit today's go-to-market teams that will lead the next generation of unicorns. Email me, web, at thejdavidgroup.com to learn more about how we can help. And don't forget, I'm also working on a book with the same title, Goats of Growth, which is the untold stories of the greatest revenue leaders of all time. So follow me on LinkedIn to learn more about that. It's due out by the end of 2023. Now, my guest today is Casey Jacox, a sales and leadership coach who helps companies realize the power and impact that humility, vulnerability, and curiosity have on internal and external relationship building. Casey also wrote a book about relationship building called Win the Relationship, Not the Deal, where he shares 6 principles to win new and existing relationships. And I should also say that Casey is a proud father and husband and was inspired to start his own podcast called the Quarterback Dadcast, which I recently had the pleasure of joining. And he started it as a way to learn from other dads to become a better dad himself. Casey, welcome to the Goats of Growth.
That was a money intro. You nailed it. I'm honored to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you. Well, you're just looking at your background and knowing a little bit about you, I wanted to make sure that I edified you and did as strong a job as possible introducing you to my audience. So thank you for being here.
No, you bet, man.
So let's just start with what I just ended with, actually, which is the Quarterback Dadcast, because I have just a question, which is, what have you learned so far from the dads that you've interviewed on about being a dad and being a great dad and all of the challenges that come along with it?
I've learned a lot. I've learned we're all flawed. I've learned we all have gaps. I've learned we all have the ability to if we mess up today, we can make tomorrow better, which teaches our kids the power of apologizing. And then I think vulnerability goes into that by realizing we don't have everything figured out. I've learned a lot of other just small calm exercises or phrases. One of my friends I've interviewed, he wasn't a super friend then, he's a friend now, a guy named Matt Miller. He talked about just a simple question of, tell me how I can be a better dad this week to his kids, or to his wife. Tell me how I can be a better husband to you this week. I mean, if you ask him to ask it, it's not worth it. But if you truly ask it to genuinely learn, and then you apply either my 3 or 5 favorite words, which is, okay, tell me more, or tell me more about that, and allow them to speak, you learn, which is, I think aligns perfectly with a sales and biz dev perspective. I also learned a great exercise around just the dinner table. Too often families are going left and right and forward and back and not making time for dinner. That's something in our family that's very important. We always make time for that. I'd say we're 90%. We aren't perfect, but we're 90% there. And one exercise we learned I'd love to share with your audience is this: you go around the room, and let's say I go around and I'll say 2 things I appreciate about every member of the family. So 2 things about my wife, my son, my daughter, and then I have to say 1 thing about myself that I appreciate, or that I value. And everybody goes around and does it. What's cool about it is it teaches your kids to embrace and I guess celebrate their gifts, which we all have. And it also celebrates or encourages that golden rule of life, or treating people the way you want to be treated. So like imagine how they would feel if you gave them a compliment. So those are a couple of things that top of mind when you ask me that question.
Why just one about yourself? Curious.
You could do two. I don't know. It's a great question. I mean, you could do it. That's the exercise I got taught, but you could do. I actually think it's one per each person, so that ends up being four. So I have a family of four, so it'd be like 4 times for me.
Got it. Okay, so you're going around asking telling one person one thing that you are that you are happy about them, or something that you appreciate about them, and then they say the one thing about you.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. Fantastic. Okay, good. So you and I spoke, when we spoke initially, I was fascinated. One thing jumped out at me, I'd say more than anything, which was, and this was just sort of a perception that I had. I'm not even sure how much we even talked about it, but your ability to execute fascinates me. And I know you were in the industry that I'm in, recruiting, to start your career, earlier in your career, and you had a lot of success, and you opened up doors for the company, and you brought them to heights and brought them into opportunities that hadn't existed before. And you really just did a great job, not only as an individual, but then also as a leader. And the thing that I kept thinking in my mind is that, Casey has an ability to just get things done when something is in front of him. Part of our conversation also, I learned that you were an athlete growing up. You were a quarterback that got hurt, pretty badly in high school. That ended, I believe you said, your career there, or at least came close, I think, at one point. And I'm just curious to know about the habits that you developed early on in your life, as a result of maybe some of those setbacks, and perhaps maybe even how you were raised by your dad and your parents.
Yeah, that's a lot there. I'll do my best to summarize. So I learned so my parents were very supportive. They gave me a lot of opportunity. We were, middle-class family. Our vacations were, we'll call it, camping. I rarely went on a plane ride. Got into sports, and I wasn't your average athlete, but for whatever reason, at call it 15, 16, that's when I started learning about confidence. And a great coach, mentor I've met in my life, guy named Bruce Brown. If anybody wants to check him out, I'll make sure I can get you a link to his. He runs a company called Proactive Coaching, and his mentors are likes of John Wooden, Coach K, Dean Smith, Buck O'Neill, Dick Vermeil. So a few. Well, you want to talk about goats? Those are some goats. And he is 75 years young, and he's still got a growth mindset. He's still learning. And so he taught me, or he retaught me, that how confidence is formed, which happens from one person inside your home and one person outside your home. And as I think back to a 15, 16-year-old, that's where I felt that people started believing in me. They were seeing things I was going to do that I didn't see myself yet. And so I learned the habit of visualization. I learned the habit of goal setting. Literally, I can remember, as I'm 46 years young, I remember as a 16-year-old, Jay, like a picture of my goals next to my bed that said bench, squat, clean, body fat, 40 time, throwing. I had to do all that. I made the choice because I knew that if I did all those things, my coach said, you'll have a chance to be our starting quarterback. And so right then I learned about, here's the goal, but let's reverse engineer. What do I have to do to get there? Well, I need to lift. I was like, it looked like, I joked, used to look like Beetlejuice, like 6'1", about $130. I should have been a cross country guy, but somehow they let me play quarterback. And I literally would lift in the morning at 5:30 with one of our offensive linemen. And then after school, so Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'd lift before school. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I'd lift after school. And Tuesdays and Thursdays, I'd throw to anybody, whether it's my sister, a member of the band, woodshop teacher, anybody. And those habits, I still think about to this day how they helped me. I learned about resilience through that football journey. You mentioned the injury. That injury has propelled like rocket fuel. It's like automatic gas tank. It just keeps filling because I remember it brings back the feeling. And that's where I learned a lot about it can be taken tomorrow. So we think about, you might have the best account in the world. You might be rolling, and all of a sudden they lose budget. What are you going to do? they might have a layoff if you're in staffing or consulting, and they might need to let 50 consultants go overnight. What are you going to do? Right. And so me going through an injury where I was starting quarterback, I beat out a kid my junior year in high school that a lot of probably people didn't think I was going to do it, but I did it because I think a lot of it goes back to that confidence and goal setting and hard work and work ethic. Fast forward to my senior year, I would end up breaking my foot the last play of the jamboree before the season started. And the gentleman I beat out my junior year, he would now get forced into playing quarterback. Now I had a good junior year summer. I was starting to get recruited by some Division I schools. And it was like, oh my God, this is really happening. This is so cool. And then boom, injury happens. Last play of jamboree. I break my foot in 4 spots. Season's over. I'm like, oh my God, what just happened? And like my life, it's probably the most depressed I've ever been in my entire life. And I think back to that day often. And 3 games into the season, the team moved on. Shane's our quarterback. We got to go. Coaches, they're not worried about me. I mean, maybe they are a little bit, but they got to get the team ready. And I'm feeling sorry for myself. I'm thinking bad thoughts. I'm thinking, hopefully he plays bad. This is my team. Just a selfish teammate. And as a captain, I was more mad at myself because that's not how captains act. And thank God, thank my mom. I don't know. I can't remember how this happened, but something gave me the strength to go talk to my coach and say, I need help. I'm embarrassed by my behavior. I'm a captain. I'm not acting like it. And he was like, I'm so proud of you. I'm like, how the hell are you proud of me, coach? He goes, because you had the vulnerability and the strength to come tell me this stuff. And we're going to figure out a role for you. I'm like, what are you talking about? He's like, you know this offense better than I do, Casey. You're going to go up in the booth and call plays. You're going to help me be my offensive coordinator. Wow. And I looked and I was like, you got to be kidding me. But right when he said it, it was like a vacuum sucked that negative energy out. I was now a captain again. I had clarity, I had vision, I had a role. All things that we as sales leaders need to make sure our team has. Right. And I would go on, I'd get like, I was essentially coaching the rest of the year. Last game of the year, I think I got in for like 3 snaps. And, a bunch of schools want me to walk on, but Central Washington was the only school that said, hey, we think we're kind of getting a guy that's under the radar. And my coach went and put a good word in for me. A few other coaches did too. And I ended up being a 3-year starter in college, All-American my senior year, got teased in the Arena League, had a chance to play overseas, declined it. But I don't make this about like an Uncle Rico Napoleon Dynamite story, but that journey, I can think of multiple examples in the business world that prepared me for what I was about to do, whether it was, breaking into new accounts, being told that you're too young for this job, or we don't think you have the right skills for this job. And it was just like, boom, watch. You think that's funny to me that you don't. And I just would literally go into psychotic competitive mode. And it was almost flashbacks to that goal sheet as a 16-year-old next to my bed.
So let's talk about that goal sheet for a moment and the fact that you were getting up early in the morning, you were lifting weights, you were throwing every day. And what I'm hearing in there is discipline, right? Because it's one thing to have a goal. It's another thing to write it down. And it's another thing to have the discipline to focus on what you wrote down. So as it pertains to that, and you can look at it in your coaching practice now as you're coaching leaders about goal setting and attaining those goals, what do they need to do in order to, once they've done that, to actually develop the discipline to stick with it?
Mm-hmm. 2 things. One, we're gonna remove 5. I'm gonna teach my 5 swear words. And I'm not talking F bombs or B bombs or D bombs. These swear words will, I believe, eliminate goals from ever being set in the first place, which is when we say, man, I need to do this. I should do this. I have to do this. I want to do this. Oh, I don't think I do. I can't do that. All those words do is create anxiety. So instead, I go small and I just write down, I will. So if I took a picture, Jay, and sent you a picture of my goal board, you'd see the word I will in front of every single thing. So when I coach people, I help them figure out what they will do, not what they want to do. That's one thing. And then the second thing I always tell people, I don't know if they can see it, but they're behind me. There's a sign on my wall that says believe. And you have to believe what you do matters. And I learned that mantra, silly mantra, but powerful, from a guy named John Kaplan, who I look up to immensely. And I had an opportunity to be his client at the end of my corporate career. I keep in touch with him from afar, but he had a massive impact on my life, and that word alone. So I always challenge my clients, do you believe what you do matters? Do you believe that goal is going to be achieved by you? And then I'll ask it to them again. And if you truly do it, then there should be no reason why we don't put in the work. I'll relate that to myself, Jay. Like when I wrote my book back in 2020, when I told people, they're like, "What, serious? You're a football guy. You're like a 3.2 guy. How are you going to write a book?" Right. And that was like the sarcastic answer was, I wanted to prove that football guys could put sentences together. But back to you said discipline, and that you nailed it. Because for 4 months straight, I wrote from 9 to 11:30 every day. And some days I felt like Hemingway. Some days I felt like Beverly Cleary, old school Ramona Quimby, age 8. Shout out to her, old school book readers. And it might have been horrible one day. It might have been good. I didn't know, but I just kept writing every day. And those are things I'd be thinking about if I'm a leader right now and the last thing I'd say is, are they your goals or are they your team's goals? And that also relates to parenting. Are these your goals as a dad or mom, or are these your goals as their goals? And I think it's up to us as leaders to use curiosity to help unlock the why behind why they want to achieve that. Like find the root of, and create some pain by them by helping them realize what happens if they don't achieve it. How's that going to feel? And make sure they understand how to get there.
How do you increase belief? In other words, if there's no, the question is, and it's on the back on your wall, and something that John Kaplan mentioned, which is that, do you believe, right? If belief is not there, question I have is, if somebody has a goal and belief is not there, what's going on there? In other words, is it a goal that, to your point, that's the wrong goal, I guess, maybe? In other words, just tell me about that, because I think that's something that's key, because it's important to believe in whatever it is that you're doing. But if you don't have that belief, you're not going to be able to get to the discipline, right?
I think two things come to mind when you ask that, Jay. I think maybe it is the wrong goal, and that's okay. Let's reset and get something that is more in line with what he or she can do. But maybe it's a confidence thing. Maybe no one's helped them realize their true gifts. And I think I love this phrase or mantra, stories sell, slides don't. So if I can help tell a story or share a story that helps he or she unlock what's possible, maybe I use my own vulnerabilities saying, man, I remember what it was like when I was at your exact age, and you're far along than I am, or I used to make those mistakes all the time. And sometimes I think fear is what stops people from believing. They all they see is the negative self-talk. All they see is the obstacles. But I think what is powerful is the power of the mind, which people don't work on enough. A lot of times I find belief increases for me when I take, a few minutes to do some self-affirmation, some quick meditation work. I don't sprint down the stairs, get to my home office and start banging into Zoom. Yeah, I'm going to exercise. I'm going to journal. Like those things get my mind right. So I can believe what's possible. I like using analogies or metaphors, because sometimes we as salespeople, we got to dumb it down for us a little bit. And I think about, like, how would we feel if we're on a plane and we're like, oh, where's the pilot? And all of a sudden he or she sprints down the jetway, like 2 minutes left, flies in the cockpit, and like, hey, you guys, and you hear them over talking with the co-pilot. Hey, did you check, do the walk around? No, we're good. We have gas. I think so. Do we have flight attendants? I'm not sure, but here, close the door. We got to be on time. Let's get going. Like that. Think about that's a lot of people are starting their Zoom in the morning. And then you wonder why you have a bad meeting. You wonder why you're not present. You wonder why you're not listening. You wonder why you're not understanding anything, because at about 8:40, if the meeting started at 8, you're finally waking up and coming to. Think about if you're a pilot flying passengers, how would they feel? Right. So, I like those analogies and visuals help me really kind of embrace back to the question you asked in the first place, which is belief. So if we believe what we were going to do and be successful, then make sure we're doing the work to set ourselves up for success.
So the work that you were doing, going back to your book for a minute, 9 to 11 every morning,
11:30.
11:30. You're writing that book. How did you, I guess, create an environment or structure your life so that you would stay on task? Because I think a lot of people have the intention of doing exactly that. I'm going to journal every day. I'm going to go to the gym every day. I'm going to exercise during this period of time, right? And it doesn't manifest itself. And as we're recording this at the end of 2022, we're going to post it in the early 2023, where people have New Year's resolutions and all that stuff, right? So it's extremely applicable at this time of year. How did you maintain that discipline? And I guess even going back to when you were in football, right? When you're 15, 16 years old, were those habits developed early on, and that was just something that you had lifelong? Tell me about that.
I think I think it all started then. I mean, I wasn't perfect, and don't get me wrong. I'm not like, there's days I have intentions and I fall through, but I have the self-awareness to get back on track. Mm-hmm. But back to the question about the book, after that 20-year run, I was essentially on the sidelines for a few years, had a non-compete and just kind of laid low. And so I used that time to write the book. So in my calendar, first time I opened up a Gmail account, didn't really need to have one before, opened up a Gmail account, opened a calendar, booked from 9 to 11:30 is every day. And what kept me going was someone's going to do it. Why not me? And then the second reason was because I told my wife, I told my kids, I told my parents, I told my friends that I was going to do this. And the pain of having to let them down that I didn't get it done kept motivating me. And I was like, I told them I was going to do this. And that's why I think power of goal setting is when we share with others. Like even when I'm coaching people now, whether it's a goal or it's a failure, I say, that's awesome. I love that you just shared that where you struggle. Tell me who else you've told, or tell me how you overcame that. They're like, what are you talking about? Why? I go, think about the power of that. If you go tell a teammate what you just went through and how you overcame it, that to me is leadership. Leadership is sharing, it's being humble, it's being vulnerable, and then going to get it. Right. And I don't know, back to your question, Jay, to me, I think it was just, I had a vision. I was so clear. I'm not a trained writer. I've had people ask me if I'm a trained conversationalist writer. I was like, what the hell does that mean? And really what it made me think of, though, is think about all the biz dev emails you and I have written in our career. Mm-hmm. We're writers. We're focusing on tone. We're focusing on message. Same thing an author does. Mm-hmm. So.
Yeah, for sure. So I want to go back to your time in the staffing industry, K-Force, we'll just name the company where you were at. You started off as an individual contributor and moved up to lead teams. As a high performer and someone who has the discipline that you've described and the ability to execute that I've observed, how then do you instill that in others to motivate others through what we're talking about here right now? And I'm assuming back then you hadn't met John Kaplan, I don't think, when you first started managing people. So where did your ability come from, going from just thinking about you to now thinking about other people and then getting them to perform at a high level?
Yeah. So I was there 20 years. I want to go back and just through story and then I'll answer your question. So I was there 20 years, close to 10 years. I was our number one rep nationally. During that journey, I actually decided to kind of like go into coast mode per se, just not coasting like I wasn't giving effort, but I was managing a desk and also producing. I think it's a really difficult role because you almost like you're competing against your internal team that you're managing, yet you're trying to grow your business. And then I realized that I can be a better leader, not manager, but leader of people by playing quarterback still, quote unquote, on the field. And so I led our national account pursuit for one of our largest customers at the time. This was years ago, so obviously things have changed. But to me, it was about setting clear goals. It was about when we would do our offsites and our plannings and our goal setting. Back to the thing I talked about earlier, the I will. Everybody's goals said I will. Our sales goals met our recruiting goals. They weren't out of alignment. Like if we wanted to close 30 deals. Well, our recruiting team better want to close 30 deals and had to align. If one of them's off, you're setting yourself up to fail. I made sure that everybody had our messaging tight, very, very tight. Like I made sure that everybody practiced often. We didn't wing it. And too often sales teams show up and they practice on their clients. I heard that phrase from John at the end of my journey, 5-6 years ago. But what John taught me a lot was the difference of conscious competence and unconscious competence, and slowing down to go fast. And at one point he called me the most unconscious competent person he's ever trained. And I said, John, that does not sound good. And he kind of giggled and he goes, it's good and bad. It's good, but it's bad that you don't know why you're doing the things you're doing. I'm going to slow you down to help you teach the things you do. And so that to me was a massive gift. I learned at 41 years old, 42 years old, because I think great leadership is slowing down and not letting the day manage us, but us managing the day. And when we ask great questions, I'm sure people in your audience have heard of the Socratic method, right? Too often a leader will, rep or team will ask me a question. I'll say, great, tell me what you think. And removing fear so that they can go achieve these goals. Little, and I was a stickler on the little things when I was, leading teams of be on time, documentation. Do we understand our your client's business? And we started out as a staffing company. Then the group I was in, we were moving into more like project-based services, outsourced projects. So it's more obviously a very more high technical, high value-based sell, but we had to have a level of competency and we had to make sure that we were all aligned. So I think back to a football play. If I call play in the huddle, like here's one from college, trips open right, 334 stretch, C post, X stop. If no one knows what that means except for 4 of us and the other 7 do, well, we're setting ourselves up to fail.
Right.
So, little things like we break a meeting with the customer. We take 5-10 minutes afterward. Tell me what you heard. What problems exist? What problems are we going to help solve? How are we going to solve them? Do we have a story to tell? Like that little exercise I learned from Cap at the end of my journey. So.
And then there's the piece of holding people accountable, right? In other words, because if what you've laid out needs to be done, and in some cases it is not done, how do you then hold people accountable while keeping them, motivated and believing in what they're doing?
Well, luckily, we were a very, very high performing team and never got to the level of us being surprised that he or she wasn't getting it done. Mm-hmm. But if we saw some signs, I love the phrase, tell me what's changed. Mm-hmm. And then just shut up and stare at them. And they'll say, what do you mean? I'm like, well, you told me in January, these were your goals. And what I see, the output you're doing right now, we're not going to help. You're not going to be able to achieve those goals. Mm-hmm. And I'm just calling you out because you gave me the green light when we set our goals. Like, hey, if one of us sees the other person not giving the effort that we're going to do, then to put out that's going to negatively impact ourselves to reaching the goal or the team, do we have permission to call each other out? And we all agreed to that. And I think, again, back to expectation management, you have clear expectations up front. No one's surprised. And I think it was just such a healthy environment where we would call each other out all the time, not to be a-holes or about egos, but to more about like, hey, I'm just doing this because you gave me the permission, and 2, I care about you, and 3, winning is important to me. Mm-hmm. So where you meant, I know that humility is a pillar that's important, obviously. Mm-hmm.
How do you do a great way, I think, anyways, of expressing humility through your stories and anecdotes and those types of things. How can other people, and how do you teach your clients to do the same thing, especially when not everybody was had that particular story, had that kind of a story where they got injured, it was a major setback. Yep. How do you sort of bring people into that world where they're showing vulnerability one way or another in humility?
I'll tell us. This started back to 11 years old, my man, where shout out to my mom on this one. 11 years old. It's the first time playing overhand fast pitch baseball. I'm, I don't even know, 5'4" and 52 pounds, but I know what I was, something ridiculously skinny, borderline like the CPS going to check on me because of my eating type thing. And the dude that was on the mound, he looked like Zeus, like 7 foot something, 400, and he couldn't hit water if he fell out of a boat. Jay, he was throwing the ball so hard, so fast, and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. First baseball game, I'm gonna die if I get hit. And so like I somehow get a walk first at bat, second bat, I'm like, this is not worth it. I'm 11 years old. Why am I gonna die in the baseball field? I'm out. So I fake a stomach ache. Coach's like, oh yeah, take a seat, Case. In the car ride home, my mom's like, hey, Jeff, I'm like, yeah, I did. Kind of. I told the coach I had a stomach ache because I didn't want to face that guy. And she's like, you did what? I was like, uh-oh. And I felt it right. And I said it. And she says, okay, And they thought, and I got home and my mom and dad met with me and they said, hey, so here's the phone. You're going to call the coach and tell him what you just told us. Yeah.
Wow.
You want to talk about accountability. So, and then I told the coach, he goes, hey, Casey, I'll forgive you, but for the team to forgive you, you're gonna have to tell them at practice what you did. 11 years old. How about that for some hardcore coaching? I remember that I can still see the team and they forgave me and we moved on. I think back to like a high school quarterback. I went 3 for 11 one day. So that's not good. The person who interviewed me after the game said, hey, Casey, you went 3 for 11. It's a tough day, but you had 8 drops. How'd that make you feel? So I would have went 11 for 11. I threw the ball well. I played great, but who gives a, what?
Right.
I said, what? It was a wet night. I could have made it easier for my receivers. That was on me. I'm going to play better next week. And I don't know why that happened, but my first thought was be accountable. And maybe it's the 11-year-old story. I think we can all find some reason in our life. And when we either had the choice, that slight edge moment, do we blame others? Do we blame ourselves?
Mm-hmm.
And for me, what motivated me, I never wanted to be someone that people thought was an a-hole, was arrogant. I always wanted to ride the line of confidence and arrogance. We're confident, I believe they're going to follow me, but not to the point like, God, what a dick.
When you told your team
as an 11-year-old,
how did you feel after you told them?
Amazing. I was so scared.
Right away or?
Right away.
Wow. Okay.
Right away. Because I can still I can't believe I'm telling the story on your podcast. Right. But I still can see, I was literally on a field and I told him and I said, I'm sorry. I said, it'll never happen again. I can't wait to compete when my opportunity is given. And I think my mom and we practiced with my mom and my dad a little bit, but then we ran a lap as a team because that was and then it was over and it just, everybody forgave me. Now times have changed, but I still believe that when we own our stuff, own our mess, Cap, one of the things one of his quotes he always said was, it's okay not to know every answer. It's just not okay not to do anything about it. And I love that one, always stuck with me. Same thing. Like, okay, so I messed up, a bad one. I lied to my team. I lied to myself. I pretty much told them I'm scared, but I never would want to feel that again. I'll tell you that.
So I think the other side of that coin is also authenticity, right? Because one of the things that I am very cognizant about and just sort of showing up every day is being authentic and not showing up as Jay Webb and not sending my representative, right? And so when I screw up, I know I screw up, I'm just going to tell people that I screwed up, and I do feel better about it. And so that if you're leading people and you made a poor strategic decision, let's just say, or put your team in a bad situation or a less than desirable situation where things didn't work out. Your example with the baseball is obviously very clear. I mean, I can picture that, but it could be something small, like for instance, I as a leader, where you could have said, maybe let's say at the end of a quarter, at the end of a month or something, it's like, maybe I maybe that territory was a little imbalanced, right? Maybe the amount of leads or opportunities that I thought we were going to have at that particular quarter, at that particular year, didn't come out, right? And that's my bad, something like that, right?
Totally. Yeah, I think there's a lot of companies. I mean, I remember seeing it even at Kforce early in my journey. You had values, you put them up on the wall, right? Do they mean something? Right? So it's great that the executive team knows it, but does every office know them? And I think even back to the word vulnerability, I love when companies or leaders tell me, yeah, we love vulnerability here at our company. We're very vulnerable. I'm like, that's so good to hear, man. That's so good to hear. I go, well, tell me the last time you've said where you've messed up, what you're scared of in front of your team. I'll just look at them like, well, never. I said, well, then you don't have vulnerability. I believe. I think because what vulnerability in my experience unlocks is removes fear. It at least puts a good dent in it. It removes fear so that we can know that, hey, I'm going to mess up, but my boss got my back. Now, if I keep messing up the same thing each every day, well, that's probably gonna be a problem. But if I make a mistake or two and I say, hey, I need help, or man, I messed this up, and can we help get the deal back on track? Can we do a deal review, or can we look at our sales process and take time to find some gaps? Like, what leader would not want that?
Right.
Versus the hope strategy. And then now we're missing our number every quarter.
Well, and as a leader, when you're showing vulnerability, obviously you're allowing your team to show vulnerability, to show authenticity. And as a result of that, you're able to not even anticipate, I guess, just know more about what's happening within your reps' accounts, let's just say, because they feel as if they can be vulnerable and share, what's happening, right? And so if you're forecasting, you can get out ahead of it all, right?
That 100%. And I even think I'll use vulnerability back to practice. Like even in the sales coaching I do now, whether I'm working with teams or sales leaders, I'll role play with them about their product. I said, let me go. They're like, you don't even know our product. I don't care. I'll practice. And so it like sets the stage. I'm finding that if I'm going to practice, I don't even work at your company, and I'll give it a shot. Because wouldn't we want to mess up in front of each other versus calling our customer, hey, Susie, it's Jay over at Jay David Group. I'm going to call and practice on you. Do you got time for me to wing it and waste your time? We're really good at what we do over here. Give us a shot.
Right. Right. Do you ever feel as if you can't break through, or maybe in the past where you haven't broken through to somebody?
In corporate world or coaching?
Both, really. Well, let's just talk about coaching, right? Let's just talk about now with when in a relationship where you're working with a client, you're working with somebody, and it's just you just don't feel like they're adapting or adopting anything that you're trying to teach them.
Oh yeah. I would say, let's see, I probably worked with close to 100 and north of 100 people, and 2 people come to mind that I was not able to fix or work with, and I challenged them. It's the first time I literally probably didn't lose my cool a little bit, but I said, should we switch roles? Because you're 26, I got you by 20 years, and I feel like you're going to teach me some things, which I'm down to learn. But every time I'm trying to provide a story or ask a question or teach you something, your body language tells me you could give 2 Fs. And we had a little bit of a coming to Jesus a little bit. It was a little friction. And they were like, no, I'm good. And so it was kind of like my first radar. And the second thing is, listen, I'm not here for me. I'm here for you. And if your goals aren't important to your company or to you, let's both save each other time. And we can go our separate ways. But it's not a good use of your time nor mine for just to go through the process. And then I eventually had to go to the leader and saying, listen, I can keep doing this, but I don't think it's a good use of your money or our time. And I remember bouncing ideas off of other coaches I've worked with. I've met. I'm like, hey, do I have some gaps here? Here's the struggle. And I think, sometimes people's own egos get in the way and it stops them. And I think there's obviously deeper rooted issues sometimes with those types of people, that maybe there's things in their past they haven't dealt with, or they're maybe feel abandoned or confidence, and I did my best to show empathy before I kind of lost my marbles a little bit on them. But, and sometimes my hope, my optimistic opinion is I hope that maybe that experience of it not going well for both of us is a reminder for he or she that, man, I don't want to experience that again. Maybe they have that aha moment that says, shoot, wish I could have that back.
What about, you're so goal oriented, obviously. And I'm going back to your bedroom where you have the goals written on your wall, specific, not just goals, but like specific goals, like the actual time that you want to run the 40 in and all that stuff. When you are engaging with a new company or new client, what goals are you writing down for that particular company or individual for yourself? And just that example you just gave, right? 26-year-old. You're trying to help that person achieve something, right? Whatever that something is that the company wants that person to achieve, whether it's shorter sales cycle or higher conversions over the phone, whatever metric it is that that person's trying to improve. As a sales coach, coaching other people from outside of the organization, what goals are you writing down for yourself for that particular company or client? Like, okay, if I help them achieve this, I will feel good about this, right? Because where's your dopamine hit, I guess, coming from? Where are you getting your satisfaction? You know what I'm trying to get at?
Totally. So I never write goals down before I meet with people because then there'll be my goals, right? So I come in curious and I love asking questions. I think when you and I talk, it's hard because we're both asking each other so many questions. We don't make it too far. Joking there, but I think asking. Sorry, can you repeat that question? I just lost my train of thought.
Yeah, no, that's all right. It's all right. It's like, what kind of goals are you having for yourself? Yeah.
Yeah. So I slow people down. That we call that moment real quick, little CTE moment. It's too many college football hits. I lost my mind real quick.
Vulnerability. That's in it.
There we go.
Humility and vulnerability. Yeah.
To me, what fills my tank is when people start getting back to the basics, the habits that will create success. So not the 40 time, but the stretching, the high knees, the leg kicks, like the little things are going to build your momentum. So like in sales, like the meeting recap, Casey, I applied TED-based questions and I asked second, third level. And I heard the client say, great question. Like those small goals. So like a normal 3-month project with me is we meet weekly for the first month. And then months 2 and 3, we're going every other week, total of 8 sessions. From sessions 3 through 8, they're bringing everything to me. I'm getting curious. I'm asking tons of questions. So my dopamine hit is when we're refining sales habits, and I'm using my own failure or own vulnerability of like what I didn't work. But then I can say, hey, these 6 things I worked on and did very well for a consistent time. They helped me achieve elite level results. They're up. If you want to do that, let's get those habits right in the first place so that we can fly that plane as fast as we can. And then once we get later into the project, we're tying these new habits back to specific deals so that we can measure success together. Like, man, I'm glad Casey taught me how to do this, or we looked at an email together and we craft the messaging or we changed the end of the email with, instead of, hey, let me know if you have time to meet, to, hey, I'm available on Monday at 3, Friday at 4, Tuesday at 2. Tell me what time works best for you. Like changing little word tracks, and all of a sudden meeting are going up. I've goals, like I've seen one client use some curiosity language I taught him, that they saw like an increase of like 12%, 12% deal cycle shrunk and deal cycle increased by just being more curious. Now that was their idea, not mine. They actually used Gong and AI to kind of track the different words they're saying. When I heard them say it, I was like, oh my God, this is freaking money, right? Like that fills my tank. Seeing people, like these are little things, but they're big things to me. Like seeing people get more active on LinkedIn, seeing people comment, tag me on a post that I'm coaching, seeing people who they have big hiring goals. Instead of blaming HR and recruiting, what are you doing about it? How are you helping? Are you resharing jobs on your site? Are you tagging people? Are you helping recruit, sending people to your recruiter and being a good teammate? Or are you just blaming them? Right? Those types of things fill my tank.
Can you teach curiosity?
I think so.
How?
And it's practice.
Give me an
example. So we might do a role play, and then we'll do a 5-minute role play, let's say, or 2-minute role play, and then we'll get done. We'll say, and I'll say, hey Jay, tell me 2 things you did great and 2 things you didn't do as well. Then I'll give you 2 things, and then we'll say, okay, here's where I think you could have asked 2 or 3 more questions. Tell me what you could have asked. I'm not going to give the answer. Okay, okay, and then I'll say 2 or 3. Then I'll say, okay, tell me what else. And they'll forget that I asked them about the 2 or 3, and I'll ask it again. Awesome, I love that one. Tell me one more. And I'll keep pushing them. All of a sudden, they've thought of 5 or 6 more questions. I said, now let's write these down and make these part of your mental fabric so that when you go into your next meeting, you can use those. Because your client, Maya Angelou, my favorite people, she says, I bring this into holistic differentiation. Maya said, it's not, I'm paraphrasing her quote, but not what you said, why you said it, but how do you make people feel when they leave the room? And as a curious seller, sales teams, sales leaders, your clients will remember you so much better by asking questions. So teaching curiosity, I give an example. Tell me the last time, Mr. and Mrs. Rep, where you heard the client say, wow, great question, right? If you're not hearing it, you're not being curious enough. I teach this thing called the 3-tap rule. So I literally, if I'm asking you a question, Jay, I'm going to ask a question, blah, blah, blah. That silence that we allowed there, I just tap my arm 3 times. You won't see it, or I might tap my leg 3 times because I'm giving space for the prospect of the client to answer me.
Mm.
And if we're talking over them and not providing space, we're wasting an amazing question we just asked.
Mm.
Right?
So in that example that you just shared with teaching curiosity, right, where you're role playing, share with me what you did well, what you didn't do so well, where you could have asked this particular question. And by the way, I'm asking this selfishly, I guess, in a way, free coaching for me, I guess, everybody, is because I believe, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this as well, but to me, curiosity is, personally for me, it's my superpower. And I feel like most good, strong salespeople, the best salespeople that I know, have a high degree of curiosity. And I have a difficult time teaching people to be curious. And the example that you just gave me, as I'm listening to it, I'm thinking to myself, is that me teaching them giving them the fish, or teaching them how to fish in that instance? In other words, those questions that you just gave that person in that example, and they're writing them down. And they're like, okay, when a similar thing comes up, I'm going to ask those questions again. Is that just them repeating the questions that you just shared with them and not necessarily exercising the muscle of curiosity?
I see where you're going with that, maybe, but I still think that the gap where teams don't get curious is the sales leaders or leaders of a company. They have what I call smartest in the room syndrome. They're leading a 45-minute meeting. They're talking for 42 minutes at a time. Mm-hmm. And everyone's blacked out. Like, what the hell has happened? Right? Or we aren't engaging them enough. We aren't putting them in spots to like potentially fail a little bit, not catastrophic where they're going to hurt deals, but like a little mess up the client won't know, but we might know. Create those spaces where their confidence starts to rise. Like our curiosity will inspire other people's curiosity if we're continuing to ask questions, right? Kaplan taught me this thing called, the front nine, back nine example. Like the first 9 holes, it's all about the client. It's all about the prospect. Don't tell about yourself. And you playing golf, front nine's a great 9. You get a couple beers and hot dog at the turn. By the time we get to 13, 14, then maybe start talking about yourself. But I believe, now maybe I'm naive, which I choose to be at times. I've seen the clients I've worked with, their curiosity improved by doing the things I've shared with you. Again, it takes a mantra of slowing down. A lot of times, sometimes companies say, we don't have time for sales training. We're good. We don't have time for this. We got to get off. We got to hit the year strong. And I'd say, well, tell me what new habits you're going to use to increase or change the results from last year. Because right now you're trending down. If we continue the same habits, tell me how you're going to change. Right?
Yes. So let me just go to what I opined, I guess, or gave you my opinion on, which is curiosity, right, as being a very strong characteristic or character trait. What for you are the characteristics that you look for, or that you've even seen in some of the best salespeople that you've coached and led?
Curious. I'll steal your thunder. That's my superpower too. It lays dormant with most people. They just don't activate it. I think the best sellers have handled adversity in anything in their life. They must have handled adversity. I want to hear stories of resilience. I don't care if it's a math quiz, a breakdance contest, a Trump. I mean, here's a crazy one. Fifth grade. Me and my friend, I'm not gonna say her name because if I put her on blast, she'd be mad at me. We were doing the theme song to the Flintstones. I had my brand new silver trumpet, 5th grade, right? Assembly, stood up. She goes, I'm out. I can't go. Too scared. I'm like, what do you mean? We're doing this together. I had to go solo. Like back then, 5th grade, that was adversity for me. What am I going to do? I remember my 3rd grade teacher. I told her I wanted to, remember El DeBarge?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Rhythm of the Night. How good's that song? I love that song. And I told her I want to do a lip sync contest in 3rd grade. And she's like, okay, yeah. And so she did this thing, let me come in. I forgot all the words.
Wow.
Right. Yep. Forgot all the words, but like those things. So I look for stories and I want to see them like that. You see my personality come out, but I'm being me. This is my authentic self. Right. The fake it till you make it is the worst advice ever. I hate that advice. I literally spoke 2 weeks ago to a company, unnamed company. Right before I went on, one of the leaders said, "Hey, I want you guys to fake it till you make it." I was like, "No, we did not just say that." And I was like, this is going to be probably client suicide, but I can't keep my mouth shut. I said, I hate to start this way. I hate to call you out. However, you're going to see a slide here soon that says the exact opposite of what you just said. So let's get it out now. So please, everybody, listen to me, not that person. And I did it with like a kind of tongue in cheek. So it kind of released the thing. And I gave example why. I said, dad joke coming here, Jay. The number one reason for us to be ourselves is because everybody else is already taken. Right. So, and luckily that person actually came up and said, man, I appreciate you calling me out. That was actually helpful. I was a little scared to do it, but I'm like, here's a perfect example. I'm going to be vulnerable, be myself. I'm not trying to be mean to that individual, but when our sales teams or leaders are trying to be, okay, am I the Casey at work or the Jay at work or the Casey at, just be you, right? The power of asking for help, the power of like realizing you don't have to have everything figured out. I didn't memorize my playbook in college in the first day. It took me like 3 years to know it. And now as a 46-year-old, I remember those plays for no other reason than just random stories like I've told today, but I still remember it.
Yep. And I love that example too of calling out the person that was just on stage right before you, because it does show in that moment, to your point, vulnerability. And then I also say authenticity, because you're teaching people how to be vulnerable. And then you're literally walking out there and showing them how to do it, and then showing how to navigate through it, which by the way, is also a little bit of resiliency in there, because there could have been a setback there. You could have had, a negative impact one way or another. I mean, obviously, luckily that person was growth minded enough and showed enough, and showed you grace, and frankly, that's why you were there anyways, right? To teach and for them to learn from you. So I love that story.
I think I taught one of my other favorite words is uncommon. Tony Dungy wrote a book about that. Kaplan, that's one of his favorite words. That's one of my favorite words. Uncommon behaviors create uncommon results. That the common thing to do would be like, I'm not going to say anything. I don't want to make it weird. What a great opportunity to be uncommon. And again, my tone of how I said it was I brought the tension down. If I said, man, that guy's a chump, screw him. We're not going to, then all of a sudden I'm creating these like all of a sudden West Side Story, Jets and the Sharks break out. But like, it's again, tone is one of our also superpowers as sellers. Back to your question a second ago. So,
man,
I love talking about stuff.
Well, I was going to get into the rapid fire 5, but I need to just, if I can, for a second, just follow up on what you just said there as well, which is tone, because I was thinking that same thing. I'm like, well, all right, so Casey has the ability to walk out there, show vulnerability, and set the right tone at the same time while giving a particular clear point of view and a message that's going to that will help other people. With tone, because frankly, I think a lot of the successful salespeople and sales success is science in a lot of ways, right? So when you talk about building habits, and I think habits and discipline, frankly, are part of that science, right? But then when you start talking about tone, and even within there, the vulnerability at the same time is more on the art side of it. When you're working with your clients, and I know that, we talked about, certain other things that are like curiosity, which may be a little bit nebulous. Tonality is really hard to sort of nail. How do you teach that, or do you teach that? Can you teach that?
Yeah, I mean, that's how I'm doing it. Whether maybe let's do another podcast in a year. I'll tell you how it's working. But the clients I have used, shared this with, it has worked. So when I find we're doing like a practice, or I find they give an answer or anything they say, and I'm questioning the tone, I ask a question. Tell me how that sounded to you. Now let's stop and stare at them. Tell me how the client might feel if they read this email. Or a lot of times they'll want to share an email with me and they'll read it to me. I said, no, share your screen. Let me read it. And then I want to tell you how it sounds when I read it.
So let me ask you this. In that case, did you say you'll tell them how it sounds, or they're going to tell you how it sounds when they hear you reading it?
I'm not reading it out loud. I'm reading it in my mind. And I ask them, I say, I like to read this, and I want to see how the tone of it, because if the tone's not there, no matter how great the message or the pretty PowerPoint is, you're screwed.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make them want to feel it, want to keep reading it.
Oh, it's so interesting. You might know, but I post on LinkedIn Monday through Friday, and that's one thing that I'm always like. There's a point of view that you start with, right, when you post, and you know where you're going with it. Mm-hmm. But then the second aspect of that is, how are you going to say it? In other words, like how are you going to structure the sentences and get the reader from the top to the bottom in a way that they feel something right at the end, better, smarter, whatever it might be. And it's always a challenge, because when you first said tonality, I was thinking oral, but written is so important too as well, for sure. So.
I see so many sellers I've worked with that, like, their emails are horrendous.
Yeah.
Choppy, or like some little thing. Like, this is another thing. Back to the question you earlier about managing teams and leading teams. Now, I wasn't at the end of my career, not their manager, but as their leader.
Right.
And we used to send on like a cell phone, some people's emails said, please excuse typos sent from my iPhone.
Right.
And I'm like, that's JV.
Right.
You're telling that person, if I'm a client, you're telling me I'm going to be quick and I'm probably going to make some mistakes. And I like to work fast.
Right.
What hey, come fly airline. We sometimes put the landing gear down. Right.
So,
I mean,
it's so true. It's so true. Yep. I had that experience on the other side of things too, when I was a customer at a car dealership, and it wasn't the message that the service person was sharing with me was not met by me with much appreciation. Let's just put it that way. But I said it to her. I told her, I go, listen, I'm like, what I'm hearing you tell me right now is that when you sold me the car, you sold it to me in the condition just well enough to get it off the lot legally. Right. I mean, that's pretty much what and that's what I heard. So that's what I shared with her. And then, and she listened back. She's like, okay. And she understood where I was coming from, but she didn't know that I had sold cars in the past. And so it was, I was trying to put it all in context and be, I didn't want to be a jerk, because I think even when you're not, when you are the customer, for me, I want to be a good person. I never want to sound like a jerk. But so yeah, that certainly resonates for sure. Well, thank you for sharing that.
You bet.
You ready to get into the rapid fire 5? We're asking
Let's
5
go.
questions. Give me 5 answers. All right, here we go. This one's a fun one for me to you, which is, what motivates you?
My family.
Name a big goal you have right now, and when would you like to accomplish it?
Oh God, great question. You're gonna put me on spot here. I will say a book on curiosity by the end of 2024.
I love that.
Hold on, I gotta write that down, because I just committed to it. Book on curiosity. I will by 2024.
It's on record. This thing it's recorded. Trust me, in multiple places. It will live. Perfect. It will live forever. What's your most preferred way to learn new information to stay sharp?
Like audio, video, I mean? I'd say a mixture of reading and podcast.
How many hours of sleep do you average per night?
7.
What's your favorite thing to do when you aren't working?
Playing golf.
Playing golf. All right. So this is a bonus sort of round, if you will. Which
overtime.
Oh yeah, overtime. That's right. Overtime. Right. I'm sure you know a thing about overtime. The one question that you would like for me to ask my next guest.
Tell me your biggest failure and how it made you successful in your sales career.
Tell me your biggest failure and how it made you successful in your sales career. Fabulous. And Casey, what I'm doing now is known as stalling for time, as I look for my last guest's question. That
I don't feel stalling. I just feel like you're patient and you're kind and you're creating space for me to think. I don't feel like stalling at all.
I need you to create patience. I need you to create space for me to think right now while I scramble to try to find the last question from my last guest, which I can't find.
See,
right now.
we're being vulnerable to each other. We're teaching people.
I am. That's right. We are. Okay, here we go. Right here. I found it because I highlighted it in my last order. So here it is. All right, here we go. How do you balance the concepts of retaining revenue and getting new revenue while building new consumption models? And let me just say this while I ask that question, which is that I don't know if you're able to or comfortable answering that question, because I think that they were expecting someone who was leading a software technology company to answer that question. However, if you are comfortable answering that question, go right ahead. If not, then I can ask you another question. Okay.
No, how I first interpreted that question, my first gut snap, Malcolm Gladwell blink response was CRM. I'm a CRM psycho. I document everything. I don't, if it's in my CRM, that means they are an active client. They might not be spending money right now, but they still require active communication, active follow-up. If they're in my CRM and there's no activity, that means they've passed away or they've moved out of the country.
Wow.
And so that's how I mean, it's uncommon to keep following up. To me, that was, I thought everybody did that. And I realized that not many people do. They hate following up. They hate CRM. They hate documentation. They think it's for their leader. That's how I do it. That's how I do it today. I started my quote unquote consulting company in a global pandemic on accident. I'm still growing.
On accident? How on accident? Why was it on accident?
Because I didn't mean to do it. I had a client. I had multiple people ask me if I coach, and my response was, "Yeah, my kids." And actually, this is a good story, real quick. So I said, "Yeah, my kids." And then I had enough people start asking me if I keep coach that I said, "Well, maybe I should look into this." And I called a friend of mine who I met during my networking year in 2020, and his name's Andrew Moss. Shout out to Andrew. And I go, "Hey man, I keep getting people ask me if I coach, but I'm not certified. What do you think I should tell them? What do you think I should do?" And he looked at me. He goes, "Hey, can I be honest with you?" I'm like, "That's why I called you." He's like, "No, I'm going to be really, really honest with you." I said, "Bro, listen, give it to me. I've thrown 4 picks in the first half, got booed in college. I've been a part of big deals. I've been in boardrooms. I can take it. Give it to me. I'm ready." He said, "Okay, good. So Casey, what I've heard about you is you had an elite career. You were this, you were that. You've done nonprofit work. You've done this, you've done that, blah, blah, blah." And he had a copy of my book. He holds up my book. He goes, "Hey, dumbass, here's your certification. I want you to get out of my mother effing face and stop wasting my mother effing time."
Wow.
And I was like, my eyes got big. I was like, "Oh my God, I'm an idiot." I go, "Andrew, thank you. Yes." I hung up with him, the Zoom. I called Leslie back, my client friend now to this day, who my wife works for. Shout out to Clear Edge. And I said, "Leslie, I know you told me you're looking for a coach." She goes, "Yeah." I go, "Well, I think I found him." She's like, "You did?" I go, "Yeah. Can I tell you about him real quick?" She's like, "Sure." And I described myself. She's like, "Oh my God, who is he?" I'm like, I go, "It's me. When do I start?"
Love it. I love it.
She's like, she's like, "Are you serious?" I'm like, "I'm dead serious. Give me a shot. Bet on me. I'm betting on myself. Bet on me." And that's the first client. I have not looked back.
I'm so glad you saved yourself for the punchline. In other words, I'm glad you didn't tell it was you and then told a lie, but you described yourself and then gave you as the punchline. That's fantastic. I love it. Love it. Fantastic. Like you said, stories sell, slides
don't.
Yep, absolutely fantastic. Casey Jacox, thank you for being such an awesome guest on the Goats of Growth.
I'm honored, man. You keep doing what you're doing. You inspire a lot of us with your content. Keep up the great work.
I appreciate it. Oh, one other question before I let you go, of course. How can people follow up with you to learn more about you, perhaps maybe hire you as their coach, or just sort of ask any questions they may not have asked?
Yep. Great. Thanks for asking. Best way is just to go to my website, Casey Jacox. So CaseyJacox.com. That's a great way. I'm very active on LinkedIn. If people are interested in my book that I wrote, which is called Win the Relationship, Not the Deal, that's on Amazon. You can get it in Kindle, paperback, or the Audible, which I narrated myself. As the author, I've read that book 9 or 10 times, and I keep learning something from myself every time I read it. So if I, as the author, can learn, so can you. And then lastly, if people want to check out my podcast, it's on every main podcast network. It's called the Quarterback Dadcast, and episodes come out every Thursday morning.
Awesome. Fantastic. We'll make sure we put those links in the show notes as well. Teron, make sure that we do that. Casey Jacox. Thank you. Goodbye, everybody. Cue the music.